And we'll be talking to Yasser Kim in just a moment. But first, a little more detail. At the same time, 4 Egyptian banks have halted dealings with Qatari banks. Following that particular diplomatic row, the bankers have said that the halting of transactions with their Qatari counterparts came on internal orders from management at their respective banks. But it does exclude the opening of letters of credit, which is, of course, required for imports. Now, there had been no official communication to the banks from the Central Bank of Egypt on this, and the central bank did not immediately respond to requests for comment. Residents of Cairo, they've also been expressing support for the government's decision to cut ties with Qatar. Now, the coordinated move, so Yemen and Libya's eastern-based government also join in a little later, creating a dramatic rift among the Arab nations. Now, many of these countries are also members of the Organization of Petroleum Exporting Countries, OPEC. Qatar said it was facing a campaign aimed at weakening it, and the authorities there have denied that they are interfering in the affairs of other countries.
Yes, of course, as long as it harms us as Egypt. Of course, we're supporting the absolute severing of relations with them.
Cutting the relations is a must. The relations must end, and the Arab League should take a stance.
The step should have come earlier. It is harboring the people that are harming us, although there are others that are still here in Egypt.
And Yasser Kim joins us now live from Cairo with a lot more data and context on this story. Yasser, as you just mentioned, some banks in Egypt not doing business with the banks in Qatar. But can this extend into a trade embargo with Qatar as well?
Well, obviously, if you're going to suspend flights, you close the borders and obviously air and sea access, then this will hinder a trade. Though the trade between both countries, Egypt and Qatar, is not that much, would not really affect either of them. We're talking some liquefied gas from Qatar or petrochemicals, and from Egypt, we're talking furniture. At small numbers, $500 million is not quite significant that it would make a backlash or of any effect. So yes, it's even gone to the media and football and soccer. They've all banned, for example, beIN Sports, the main sports network that has been airing a lot of international sports events, has been banned. It's been banned from the football clubs, it's banned from interviews, and even the workers in these media channels have resigned. The Egyptian and Saudi workers have resigned in these channels. So it's growing up and picking up slowly.
Indeed. The arguments a lot of these 4 countries have put forward, I'm talking about Saudi Arabia, the United Arab Emirates, Bahrain and so on, is that Qatar is supporting terror groups directly and it's perceived as being too close or too accommodating to Iran. What's the evidence to support these positions?
Well, if you talk about the Muslim Brotherhood, the outlawed Muslim Brotherhood that Qatar is harboring, itself has been interviewing the wanted leaders of the Muslim Brotherhood on its channel, Jazeera channel, going up publicly, speaking in the media, meeting and taking pictures with the leaders of Qatar. And obviously, if you talk about its relationship with extremist groups in Libya, it was not a secret. Meetings have been shown on TV with leaders of these groups. Taliban had an office open in Doha, and also they have been on the media speaking there, the leaders of Taliban, as well as in Libya, which is preparing a file, says it's preparing a file with all the evidence that Qatar is harboring and funding and arming militias there. It will be delivered to the ICC, the International Court of Justice, very soon. And obviously what made the really big change is the last interview by Tamim, the president of Qatar, the Sheikh Tamim. He admitted that Qatar has strong ties with Iran and Hezbollah and other groups, and Iran is considered, and this step is actually against the norm of the Gulf Arab countries, who see Iran as the major threat that wants to occupy the Gulf Arab states. So all these together, and admission by the Qatari president himself, or the Qatari leader himself, of doing so, has sort of been the catalyst for this action.
Okay, so now that these sanctions, as it were, have been imposed on Qatar, what's the end game here? What result are Egypt, Saudi Arabia, Bahrain and the Emiratis, what result are they hoping to achieve?
Well, this is not the first time. They tried 2 years ago. They said, all right, we will take out the embassies, the ambassadors, and we will close the embassies. Maybe Qatar would change its policies. What happened is that Qatar, with the mediation of countries like Kuwait, had sat down with the Saudis and the Egyptians, and it promised that it will release or stop harboring the terrorist groups and the Muslim Brotherhood. And this only stayed for 1 month, and it was all cancelled. Egypt found that Qatar has not really stuck to the agreement, and Saudi Arabia as well. Now they're thinking maybe if we take it a step further, an economic embargo, attacks internationally, maybe even putting pressure on other countries in the West not to deal with Qatar by giving them proof that Qatar is harboring terrorists. Maybe all this will put economic pressure on Qatar, and maybe either the Qatari leadership will change its stance, or maybe the Qatari people will push the leadership to either change its stance or even change the Qatari leadership itself.
Indeed. We'll have to leave it there for the time being. Thank you for the update. That, of course, is Yasser Hakim live in Cairo. Expect a lot more updates from him, of course, and the team in Egypt on that particular story.